So I'll put the context down. This is actually something that's quite, I think, relatively older than something that we usually talk about. But so you and I have been having a conversation on a statement essentially made by a very respected and a well-respected rather, and someone who's been in the industry for quite some time, Martin Scorsese.
Yeah.
I think about 6 months ago. I think 5 or 6 months ago. Sometime
yeah.
ago.
Last year, probably mid last year, I would say maybe.
I think this came up like during the Oscar season, in the sense that before the Oscars were taking place, somewhere around November, December, I think.
This
if I'm
is
not mistaken.
Pre-Oscars. I think just after Irishman came. I think.
Right.
Yeah.
So
because he was doing the press stuff.
Just to put this in context, the statement we are talking about is where Martin Scorsese was interviewed, and he made this broad stroke comment that he essentially, I'm paraphrasing here, but he's essentially not into Marvel movies and these comic book movies because he feels that on the one hand they are like theme park rides.
They are not cinema. That's what he said.
Exactly. And I think the broad idea that he's trying to get at is it's a means to an end in terms of financial gain and the later merchandising as opposed to actual
art.
film, the whole art. Yeah. So I think more than really being like the Android iOS sort of debate where you're on one side and me on the other.
Completely.
I think both of us have non-conflicting but different perspectives on it because we've had like minimal chats on it.
Yeah.
But I think the first way to go about it is to just try to position ourselves into like where we stand on with what we feel about that statement. Yeah. So why don't you go first, man?
Well, I feel like I mean, as much as Scorsese's work is amazing and the kind of work that he's a well-respected guy in the business, and he's definitely somebody who gave how do we say, he gave a lot of richness to cinema, starting from back in the days, right, from Taxi Driver to what we have now with The Irishman. So his words definitely mean something when he says something out, which is why obviously we are talking about it, which is why a lot of people started talking about it. But my stand is, I feel like while there is a yes and a no to this, if you are going to pick sides, I am on the side of I don't necessarily agree with him. What his statement was pretty much, he obviously wrote a longer piece afterwards for the New York Times explaining exactly what he meant. But the point being, the main idea is that cinema, Marvel movies and franchise movies that are made nowadays are not cinema. They are a different kind of cinema, is what he meant, right? But I'm pretty sure that what he meant was it wasn't cinema. Let's just be real here. I mean, his publicist would have been like, no, we can't have this. You're going to do a lot more movies. We need to be on a diplomatic side. Let's write a piece on the New York Times explaining ourselves. But for the most part, that's what he said. So my point is, I think he's not necessarily correct. I think if you want to say what cinema is, then you have to ask yourself the broader question: what is cinema, right? What the hell is this thing about anyway? So when you come to that, what is cinema? Cinema is mostly entertainment. That's why you go there. Cinema is something that you watch on a huge piece of screen. You make a day out of it. You go out with your loved ones. You go out with your friends. You go alone if you really don't have anybody. But you make you make an event out of it, is what I'm trying to say. To go and get out of the standard reality that you live in, to kind of escape into this reality, and get entertained, whether it's something that you're going to be sad about, whether it's something that you're going to be happy about, excited about, whatever, right, or passionate about. And in that terms, I feel like he's wrong to say that Marvel movies, as much as I am not a fan of them, objectively speaking, I feel like he's wrong where they are. Indeed, I feel like they are cinema, because in a way, what they have done is that they have entertained a lot of people, and that is recorded in the box office numbers as well, and it's recorded in good movies, in movies that has made the numbers, and it has made sense in the movies that has not made the numbers as well, right? There's been Marvel movies that has been failures, and there's been Marvel movies that has been like ridiculously successful. So you can't necessarily say that it's not cinema. If it's not cinema, trust me, Marvel Universe would have not been able to successfully have this much of a run for like what, 10 years at least, right? 10 years at
over
least.
10 years. I think the first
2008.
if you yeah
2008.
if you take the extended universe as having started in 2008, so yeah, it's over
Iron
10
Man,
years,
right? Starting
11
from Iron
years, yeah.
Man, it's then ended in 2019, right? So it's a long thing, and for you to successfully execute such a number of movies and actually be successful in the box office as well, people need to be entertained, whatever kind of entertainment it may be. And I would argue that, and I would argue that for him to say that it's theme park kind of movies, not necessarily. I mean, you've seen Disney movies from what, like olden days, where all the Disney princess movies, where they have a certain movie and they have taken that directly into their theme parks. It's the same thing. That's on a different level. I mean, there's no coincidence that it's been done by the same studio now, owned by. But I mean, but that's what I feel like. I feel like he's wrong to say that it is not cinema. It's a form of cinema. It's the point of cinema itself, which is to be entertained. That's
I think I agree with you in relation to that last sentiment, right? I've always said, I think my guilty pleasure is Bayham. So Michael Bay, I think you know this, and I've said this
Look,
a
respect
number
to
of times
Bayham.
to so many people.
Right? I mean, he's messed up a lot of times, but you got to give it to the Bayham.
I agree with you in that last sentiment that you mentioned, that you make a day out of it. It is entertainment. You go off, at least from my perspective, sometimes the theater experience is just to switch off, forget about everything, and then enjoy the movie. So in that context, I feel the way I looked at that statement was somewhat broadly, Machan. I didn't want to make it like a binary context in the sense of whether I agree or disagree, primarily because I've noticed similar things happen in different contexts in terms of different filmmakers as well.
Right, correct.
Because in terms of the art form, like, we are focusing on Scorsese's statement, and by the way, he has backtracked this quite substantially now. And I watched one of the roundtables directors.
He's going back on his word.
Not that he went back on it. I think he watered down what he was referring to. So the best example of why that is, for instance, there are many filmmakers, many successful filmmakers from, let's say cinema 1.0, where the distribution was primarily in terms of the theater networks. Streaming was unheard of. So that sort of genre of filmmakers have different opinions and very divisive opinions on certain things as well, including even the method by which film is produced.
Correct.
So if you take, for example, directors like Quentin Tarantino, who is a phenomenal director, but he's very specific in the way that he does his work. He shoots only on film. He has a very, very unique style and perspective of getting things done, and his passion projects are centered heavily around the olden day Hollywood. The best example is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, right? I mean, that is a passion project basically. He
doesn't get any better than that.
I saw an interview somewhere where they said that this is he took great pride in trying to turn Los Angeles and his film sets
Yeah.
into like the 60s and 70s Hollywood.
Yeah.
So you have different filmmakers who are very specific in certain ways. Having said that, if we take what Scorsese said as, let's say, comic book movies, there are more ways than one that you can make comic book movies as well, right? So I think he was referring to this one sort of template. I don't want to call it template, but let's say template for the purposes of this argument, that Marvel sort of uses in, proliferating their message. Like every single one of their films has a certain sort of technique that they follow, and it works. I mean, it's fantastic. You have an audience, billions and billions of dollars in revenue. All of that is fine, but then you also have a relatively smaller number of movies concentrated in, let's say, the Nolan franchise of like Dark Knight and Batman, which also makes billions of dollars, and I would argue is a completely sort of different take on the genre itself of comic book and
Yep.
of superheroes and things like that. So I'm looking at what Scorsese said in a different way. I don't think even he meant it that way, but when I heard what he said and when I read about him
This is what
backtracking it,
resonated with you.
yeah, for me, what I felt was, I think what he was saying was not about the genre, but how the genre is done. Because there's more ways than one to do something. Having said that, to me, like even Scorsese, right? Like his newest movie was in a platform that was not even in existence when he started his work.
Yep.
Netflix.
3-4
right?
years
and
ago. No, not 3-4
he
years
says,
ago. Yeah.
no, it's Netflix.
7 years
is-
ago.
Well, technically Netflix is much older, but in their current form, it's about like 5-6 years old.
Yeah.
But like he himself has said that The Irishman was in the works for over a decade,
Yeah.
more than a decade. He was waiting for someone to fund it, and he was ready to take up anyone who was willing to do that. And it was
Yeah.
a win-win situation because Martin Scorsese is like a well-known and respected director, and
filmmaker,
Netflix needed a win. They had
Yeah.
the money. This guy was available. He's like, you know what? I wanted to make this movie. Let's get this done.
And this, yeah.
Yeah.
This is coming into this point. This is I think one of the as much as I disagree with Scorsese when it comes to him saying his statement. This is a part that this is also another thing that I thought about, which is to go on in the line of what having these template sort of movies has done to cinema, right? As much as it is entertaining to a majority of the people, not necessarily me, there's a certain level of entertainment that you get out of Marvel movies, but I'm definitely not one to be on that camp. But my point being, yes, they are template movies. They are they have the sort of algorithm, a certain way of doing each movie as a brand guideline, if you want to talk about in our context, right? Because a brand guideline is pretty much you have a set of rules and guidelines to say specifically this is how you handle our brand, whether it's a TV, whether it's radio, whether it's print, whether it's ambient, whatever it is. These are the set of brand guidelines. You're going to use these kind of cars, you're going to use this kind of sound, you're going to use this kind of people, you're going to use this kind of color. This is the typeface, these are the sizes that you're going to use, this is how you should place it. And I feel like Marvel movies is the first franchise that successfully and very like extremely well they executed this algorithm where you feel like even the viewers might have felt that when they were going into a Marvel movie, this is what we're going to expect. We are going to come out of the theater happy people. We're going to come out entertained people. And there was always for at least I would say 95% of their movies, except for few very minor couple of movies, it always felt like the same thing, the same color palette, the same way that they've shot, the same kind of humor. That was the template that they used, and something that I felt, because I love cinema, and I want to be in cinema at one point. Sad and really depressing that I'm not yet, and that's on me. But my point being, and having watched a lot of films like Taxi Driver and Days of Heaven, Terrence Malick, right? I mean, super boring film, but um, there's a certain level of
But that goes to a point though, Mashang. As in, I think you brought up something relevant there. Marvel movies and superhero movies in general, that sort of franchise, so to speak, is more community driven than many other one-off movies, because you can't build a community around a solitary, even a sequel-based franchise. So, uh, if you take, for example, take something like Star Wars. Okay, it's not in the same genre as such. It's sci-fi in general, but clearly it doesn't get coupled within the superhero category at all, right? But if you take that, there is a community that's built around that particular franchise. Same
but
thing
this
with
is
Marvel movies.
but this is why I respect the Star Wars franchise far more than the Marvel franchise, because yes, you're correct. The one unified thing might be about those two. The two unified thing is that it's the same studio, but the second most important thing is that they both have a huge community, like a huge fan following, right? But the place where it changes, differentiate is while the Marvel movies, I feel personally that it's something that has dumbed and numbed down people, theater goers, entertain people who go to the theaters. They've made them in a certain template. Every single movie that people's expectations in terms of a movie has come down so
Yeah,
far.
you're right there. I mean,
And-
Star Wars
and
community
compared to
is
that,
far
Star
much more
Wars.
critical.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're much
Star
more
Wars
critical.
was
That's
the
true.
movie that always revamped cinema, the complete opposite of it, who gave VFX to us, right? As the first movie. That was the difference. Like so that's what I feel like in terms of there's a certain residual effect that does happen with franchise movies like the Marvel movies, and now it's becoming also uh, horror movies as well, like with Annabelle and the Annabelle movies and Conjuring and everything. Uh, Thankfully, the studio has done a good job where it doesn't feel like the same kind of feeling that you would get with Marvel movies. But yeah, there's a certain level of people's expectations has come down. For example, and people will argue about it, but this is something that I personally feel, and you will laugh when I say this. But so when Man of Steel and Batman, come on. Don't laugh, okay? I'm gonna come
I'm
to
sorry.
Irishman as well.
I wasn't cued by what you said, but just I remembered that one time that we went to watch Man of Steel, and what was more entertaining, I think that was the community around that.
Yeah,
The build up to Man of Steel
yeah.
before and then the immediate sort of cliff that everyone fell off of, including you afterwards.
I think that's part of the point, right? But my point is being that given, I think by the time Man of Steel was a different movie, but if you look at Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, the kind of movies they were, they would have had a different. I personally feel like they would have had a different, a critique from people, given that the Marvel movies didn't exist. Because by the time Batman v Superman came, there have been so many Marvel movies that had come out, and they were at a point where they, with their sheer power and the amount of movies that they had and the success that they had, they have redefined the modern superhero. So when you, as a theater goer, a movie goer, you go to the theater and you watch a superhero, in the back of your mind, because you can't expect your brain to think of something different. So the back of this is what you're expecting out of a superhero, to be like cheeky, to have those cheeky lines, and to save the day and don't kill people sometimes, even though there might be some shit like that. But the point being, that's the kind of level that the people have come down to sort of, this is the our expectation of the superhero. So when some other director or another franchise try to come and do something completely different, and this is why I thought it might work out, because in advertising we always try to penetrate, and in order to do that you need to kind of, you know, like go through the curtain, get rid of all the noise, and find like that niche place where we can shine, right? And I felt like the DC universe coming into this whole business, having that contrast from Marvel movies would be actually the best bet to go with. But they were wrong. They were completely wrong. Having that dark cinematic universe with the dark and gritty superheroes didn't work out, because people didn't like it. People were complaining, why is it too dark? Why are they always sad? Why are they always angry? Why are some of them killing people? So because of that,
But this all comes down to money also, Machan. In the
Yes.
sense that, see, one major critique that people have, not people essentially, but most, let's say, niche filmmakers have, is the fact that the distribution network of, let's say, cinemas,
Yeah.
what they do is they'll want the maximum number of ticket sales, box office sales.
Yes.
So the thing that really generates that is a superhero franchise or the Marvel franchise or
Yes.
any type of genre that's around that in a way which sort of daisy chains with one another. So one film ends, no other film in history makes you wait for the credits to roll and complete in order to
And the
get a
whole
better
theater wins.
grasp of what the next movie is going to be about. So I think then what happens is you have smaller, more independent creators or independent filmmakers and smaller films that don't necessarily get an opportunity in the theater distribution or the cinema distribution
box
that's
office.
necessary. Hence why streaming has taken off a lot, because that not only gives an opportunity for access, like millions and millions of people worldwide to have literally on their phone or on a laptop or on a big screen, if you have the setup, to have access to hundreds of thousands of films, and some films that get pushed algorithmically that would not be the case when it comes to a cinema level, because you can't get the distribution in and you can't get things sorted. I think if you take it in a deeper context to what Scorsese said, and again, this is not something that he meant as such, but taking what he said as a reflection point to think about the industry as a whole and our current state of affairs even now, this goes to show how the business of filmmaking will have to change as well, because to me, as much as this is going to get the backlash of people as well, I feel the whole superhero franchise was a phase, and it is a phase that is shifting, so to speak. This community built around it will always be there, and it will evolve into something else. But I think what Scorsese meant is that films should stop, or at least how I've understood it, is that films should stop becoming vehicles of merchandising, because it has come to the peak of it now. I'm not talking as bad as 90s or early 2000s Sri Lankan music video bad, where you'll have like a random...
Actually, on the contrary, I actually like them more than the
somewhere.
videos now, though.
but what I'm talking about is I think one of the few directors of one of the few modern directors that have used that well, and people are aware of this being the case also, is Michael Bay. His Transformers franchise was a vehicle in itself, no pun intended, for American automobile industry. Literally, every single vehicle you see in that is like a GM or like a Chevrolet.
And the cool thing about Michael Bay was that while the Marvel and Disney are studios that are famous for, and the directors behind those movies and the producers behind those movies, they were taking these characters that exist already in the comic book pages or in their art sector, and then they turned them into movies, and as a residual effect they became merchandise, much bigger than they were. Whereas Michael Bay took something of a merchandise that already existed, the toys.
Correct, Hasbro, yeah.
Right, Transformers. And he turned that into a franchise. By so breezing of
Yeah, but you have to understand where he's coming from as well. He is an ad man
he's definitely an advert.
first and
Yes.
foremost, right?
Yes.
So he is from advertising.
Yeah.
So that would
And he
essentially
did a
be his
fantastic job
DNA.
at it. Yeah, exactly.
But
which is why
that's
they
the purpose. You
Yeah.
know what you're getting yourself into. I think the problem that many might be having is when for example Transformers came out, you knew it was for merchandising, but then if you take the grander scheme of films, that might have accounted for, in terms of blockbusters, maybe 5 to 10% of the entire market. And the remaining would be spread across so many other genres and so many other filmmakers and films. But I think towards the sort of crescendo of the extended universe, like towards Endgame, what you started seeing was like people being pummeled only with that kind of film. And very
Yeah.
rarely were you able to see anything different to that.
else on the
I think that was the problem more than anything else.
correct. There was yeah, the kind of tasteful things that were different were very less when you look at the filmscape. I agree.